How do you explain to a new spouse that she cannot throw you out of a building you own when she thinks you are just the help? Why did she feel bold enough to toss my bags into the hallway the day after our wedding? What she did next made me realize I had married a stranger. My name is Graham Holt. I am 58 years old. I have lived a long life with more quiet days than loud ones. I like order. I like simple routines. I fix things before they break. I listen more than I talk. Most people read that as softness. I learned a long time ago that calm can look like surrender to the wrong eyes. I got married again last weekend. The ceremony was small. A simple room, a few friends, a few smiles that felt real. Nina looked happy. She held my arm like she wanted the world to see she belonged with me. People clapped, people took pictures, people said we looked good together. I also made one choice before that day. I did not tell Nina the apartment building we lived in was my property. I told her I was the supervisor. I said I handled repairs, tenant problems, and daily needs. I said it was steady work. I did not act proud about it. I kept it plain. I did that for one reason. I wanted to know who she respected, not what she wanted to control. I wanted a partner, not a person hunting for status. The first night as a married couple was quiet. Nothing dramatic. We ate leftovers. We washed dishes. Nina talked about the future like it was a list of upgrades. Better furniture, new rules, a different way of doing things. I nodded and said we could take time. She smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. The next morning, I woke up early, like I always do. My body still runs on old habits. I made coffee. I opened the curtains. The street looked normal. The lobby downstairs was still empty at that hour. For a moment, it felt like the wedding had changed nothing. I thought that was a good sign. Then Nina walked into the kitchen with her phone in her hand. Her face was set. Not angry, just decided. She did not ask how I slept. She did not ask if I wanted breakfast. She said we needed to talk. I told her I was listening. She said the marriage meant a fresh start, and that a fresh start needed clear space. She said my things were clutter. She said she wanted the main bedroom and the best closet. She said the unit needed to feel like hers now, not like a place she was visiting. I reminded her that we had talked about sharing the space. I said we could reorganize together. I kept my voice even. She looked at me like I was slow. She said I was making it difficult on purpose. She said I should be grateful she chose to marry me at my age. She said most women would not take a chance on a man who only managed a building. That word, only, landed like a stamp on my forehead. I did not argue. I asked what she wanted right now. She told me to pack a bag and sleep somewhere else for a few nights. She said she needed room to settle in. She said I could use the couch in the basement office if I had to. She said it like she was doing me a favor. I stared at my coffee cup for a second. I felt a strange calm move through me, the same calm I feel when a pipe bursts or an elevator stops between floors. The problem is real. Panic will not fix it. Procedure will. I walked to the bedroom. I opened my closet. I started putting clothes into 2 travel bags. I did not slam drawers. I did not raise my voice. Nina followed me and kept talking like she was building a case in her head. She said I did not understand what a real home should feel like. She said I was too plain. She said I was too small in my thinking. I finished packing. I set the bags by the front door. I took my keys from the bowl, like always. Nina stepped in front of the door. She said she wanted the keys. I said I needed them for work. I said I had to check the building and respond if tenants needed help. She said she would take over calls for a while. She said she could handle people better than me. She said I was too gentle, and tenants walked over me. She said I was not the one in charge anymore. That was the first moment I truly understood what was happening. It was not a fight between 2 tired people. It was a takeover. She was acting like the unit, and the building were prizes she had earned by marrying me. I told her I would keep my keys. Her eyes narrowed. She turned, opened the door, and pushed my bags into the hallway. The bags slid on the carpet and stopped near the opposite wall. It was not loud, but it was loud enough. In an apartment building, small sounds travel like gossip. A door down the hall opened a crack. Another door opened. I saw faces. Not full faces, just pieces. Curious eyes. People who pay rent and watch everything. Nina stepped into the hallway and spoke to them before I could. She said I was being difficult. She said I was just the supervisor and I was upset because she was setting standards. She said she did not want drama, but she would not live in a place run by an old routine. I could feel the heat rise in my neck. Not rage, more like shame. A man standing in slippers, married less than 24 hours, while his bags sat outside like trash. Someone at the far end of the hall held up a phone. I could not tell if they were recording or just checking messages, but the angle felt familiar. People love a scene when it is not their problem. I bent down. I picked up my bags. I looked at the neighbors and nodded once. I did not explain. I did not defend myself in the hallway. I learned long ago that public arguing turns you into a character in someone else's story. I walked to the elevator. Nina followed me to the lobby like she was escorting staff out of a place they no longer belonged. In the elevator mirror, I saw her straighten her posture. She looked satisfied, like she had made a point. The lobby was brighter than the hallway. The morning light came through the glass doors. Mrs. Patel was behind the front desk, sorting mail and keys. She looked up and froze when she saw my bags. Nina smiled at her and said I was taking a few days to cool off. She said she would be around if anything needed approval. She said it like she already had authority. Mrs. Patel's eyes flicked to me. Her face stayed polite, but I saw concern. She did not challenge Nina. She did not embarrass me. She just watched. I gave Mrs. Patel a small nod. I carried my bags past the desk and toward the maintenance corridor. I heard Nina behind me, still speaking in that confident tone. She said she wanted new rules posted. She said she wanted to meet tenants soon. She said she wanted respect in this building. I went down the stairs to the basement. The air changed. Cooler. Still. The smell of concrete and cleaning supplies. The maintenance office door stuck a little, like always. I pushed it open and set my bags down. Inside, everything was where I left it. Tools on the pegboard, work orders in a tray, a small desk with a monitor connected to the building cameras. The screen showed the lobby, the elevator, the hallway. I sat down in the chair and stared at the live feed. The calm did not leave me. It settled deeper. Upstairs, Nina thought she had moved me out of my life with one push. Down here, I started to understand I needed to stop treating this like a misunderstanding. I needed to treat it like a situation that required structure, records, and clear boundaries. I opened a drawer and took out a clean notebook. I wrote the date. I wrote the time. I wrote one sentence about what happened in the hallway. Then I set the pen down and listened to the building hum around me. 2 hours after Nina pushed my bags into the hallway, I was still sitting in the basement office. The chair was not made for long thinking. It was made for short breaks between work orders. But I stayed there anyway. I watched the camera views like they were weather reports. Lobby, elevator, hallway, side door. I did not feel like shouting. I did not feel like begging. I felt like I was waking up from a soft dream. I kept replaying her words in my head. She said I was only the supervisor. She said she would take over approvals. She said I should be grateful she chose me. When you hear something like that, you start counting backward. You start asking where the respect stopped. I met Nina last year at a local community event. It was one of those small gatherings where people bring food and talk about nothing important. I went because I try to stay connected. I did not want my life to shrink into work and silence. Nina was friendly. She laughed easily. She asked questions that sounded like care. She said she liked how calm I was. She said most men her age were loud and tired. She said I seemed steady. Steady is a word people use when they want a safe place to stand. We started meeting for coffee, then lunch, then dinner. I kept it simple. I did not try to impress her with stories. I asked about her life. She told me she had a grown son. She said her past was complicated. She said she wanted peace now. I believed her because I wanted the same thing. Early on, she asked about my work. I told her I managed the building. I said I handled repairs and tenant problems. She asked how many units. She asked what kind of people lived there. She asked how I got the job. I said it was a long story. She asked if it paid well. She asked if there were benefits. She asked if I had savings. She asked these questions in a light tone, like it was normal curiosity. I answered enough to be polite, but I kept details private. At the diner near my building, she once looked around at the clean booths and said a man like me must have things set up. She said she did not want to struggle again. She said she wanted a home that felt secure. I told her I understood. Later, she began to test small things. She would come over and move items around. She would tell me my kitchen was arranged the wrong way. She would say my couch was old and made my place look sad. She would tell me I dressed too plain and people did not take me seriously. I thought she was trying to help. I told myself she was excited. I told myself it was normal to merge two lives. I tried to be flexible. Then the comments shifted. If I hesitated on a restaurant choice, she would say I needed to be more decisive. If I said I was tired, she would say I was acting like a much older man. If I wanted a quiet weekend, she would say I was boring and she needed more energy around her. I still did not fight. I believed calm conversations could fix most things. A few months in, she started speaking about the building like it was part of her identity. She would tell friends she lived in a place with management on site. She would say I was in charge of the whole building. When people asked questions, she would answer first. I told her I preferred privacy. She said privacy was fine, but she did not want to feel hidden. She said a wife should not feel like a visitor. That word, wife, came before the ring. When she met Mrs. Patel in the lobby for the first time, she smiled wide and acted very warm. Then, once we were alone, Nina said Mrs. Patel was too slow. She said the desk looked messy. She said tenants would respect the building more if it felt more strict. I reminded her that the building ran fine. I said people paid rent on time. I said our job was to keep the place safe and working, not to control everyone. She said control was the same as leadership. The next week, she asked for a copy of the master contact list. She said it would help if she knew who to call in emergencies. I said the list was kept in the office for work reasons. I said tenants had privacy. She frowned and said I was acting like I did not trust her. That line came up often. If I set a boundary, she called it distrust. If I asked for time, she called it avoidance. If I said no, she said I was making her feel unwanted. When her son Kyle was mentioned, it was always in the same frame. She said he needed support. She said he was figuring things out. She said he might stay with us sometimes. She said it would be temporary. I asked what temporary meant. She said I was overthinking. She said family helps family. Kyle showed up twice before the wedding. The first time, he did not greet me properly. He looked around my unit like he was inspecting it. He asked how many bedrooms it had. He asked if there was storage. He asked if the building had a gym. When I answered, he acted unimpressed. The second time, he made a comment about my job. He said it must be nice to do small work and still have a roof over my head. He said Nina deserved more comfort than a maintenance lifestyle. Nina did not correct him. She laughed like it was a harmless joke. That was a moment I should have held on to. I should have seen it clearly. When a partner lets disrespect sit in the room, they are choosing a side. As the wedding got closer, Nina became more focused on titles. She wanted to be introduced as my wife in the lobby. She wanted to attend any conversations with vendors. She wanted to know who had keys and who did not. She wanted me to stop saying, "I will check," and start saying, "I will decide." I told her I was not a different person just because we signed papers. I told her the point of marriage was partnership, not a new power position. She looked at me with a small, tight smile and said I would learn. The night before the ceremony, she walked through my unit and said we would make changes right away. She said the bedroom needed to feel like her space. She said she did not want reminders that I lived alone. I told her we could do it slowly. I told her I wanted peace. She agreed too quickly. Now, sitting in the basement office, I understood that the wedding was not a beginning for her. It was a lever. She pulled it the next morning, confident it would move me out of the way. Up on the screen, I saw her step into the lobby again. She stood by the desk and spoke to Mrs. Patel with a firm posture, like she was giving instructions. Mrs. Patel listened without reacting. The camera had no sound, but Nina's hands moved like she was explaining rules. I wrote another note in my notebook. I wrote the time. I wrote what I could observe. I did not add emotion. I did not add guesses, just facts. Then I stood up, took a slow breath, and reminded myself of something simple. If someone wants power over you, they start by making you feel small. If you refuse to shrink, they have to try a different method. And I was done shrinking. The next day, Kyle arrived before lunch. I saw him first on the garage camera. He came in with a backpack and a loud walk, like the building belonged to him. He stopped at the door that led into the service corridor and looked around, checking corners, checking exits, like he was mapping a place he planned to use. I left the basement office and met him at the bottom of the stairs, not blocking him, not inviting him either. I kept my hands visible. I kept my voice normal. Kyle looked me up and down. He said Nina told him I was being difficult. He said the marriage changed things, and I needed to accept it. He said Nina needed space, and I should not make it a fight. I told him I understood that he wanted to support his mother. I told him I would not argue with him in the garage. I told him I would speak to Nina directly. Kyle stepped closer, just enough to pressure the space. He said I was not a strong presence, and people like Nina needed a strong presence. He said I should not pretend to be the decision-maker when I was just a building worker. He said Nina would handle the building better than me. I looked at his shoes, then at the concrete floor, then back at his face. Not as a challenge, more as a reset. I said I would not discuss the building with him. I said if he wanted to visit his mother, he could do that without making my work harder. He smirked and said he could make one call and I would be out. He said Nina had friends who knew how to move people around. He said I should not get attached to a place that was not mine. I felt that same calm again, the calm that comes when a person shows you their plan by accident. I nodded once. I told him I had work to do. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard him laugh, like my silence was proof he won. When I came up to the lobby later, Nina was there with Kyle. She stood near the front desk with her back straight, her chin slightly lifted. Kyle leaned on the counter like it was his. Mrs. Patel sat behind the desk with a polite face, but her eyes stayed careful. Nina pointed at a stack of building notices and said she wanted them updated. She said she wanted rules posted about noise, visitors, and packages. She said tenants had been too relaxed, and that was about to change. Mrs. Patel said she would review the standard process. Nina cut in and said she did not need standard. She said she needed respect. Kyle looked at me and said I should go back to the basement if I could not help. He said Nina had plans for the building and I was just in the way. I told Nina I wanted to speak with her privately. I did not ask. I stated it. Nina said there was nothing private to discuss. She said I embarrassed her by acting stubborn. She said I should have left quietly and let her settle in. She said I was trying to control her with my mood. I told her I was not controlling her. I told her I was protecting basic boundaries. I told her marriage did not mean she could remove me from my own bed and my own routine overnight. Nina said my routine was the problem. She said I lived like a man who expected nothing, and she expected more. She said she did not marry into a quiet corner. She said she married into a future. Kyle added that a future needed leadership. He said people follow confidence. He said I did not have it. A tenant walked through the lobby at that moment, a woman carrying a grocery bag. She slowed when she saw the scene. She looked at me, then at Nina, then at Kyle. She kept walking, but I could see the question in her face. Who is in charge here? Who is safe to trust? Nina noticed the tenant watching and softened her tone. She said she did not want conflict. She said she was only trying to improve the building. She said I was stressed and would calm down soon. That was the moment I saw it clearly. She did not want peace. She wanted an audience that believed her. I looked at Mrs. Patel and told her I would handle my personal situation outside the desk area. I told her to keep doing her work as normal. I kept it simple so I did not pull her into the middle. Then I walked back to the basement office. I did not slam doors. I did not show anger. I let them think my retreat was weakness. In the office, I sat down and opened my notebook again. I wrote the time Kyle arrived. I wrote what he said about making calls. I wrote what Nina said about needing respect and not needing standard process. I wrote what I observed in the lobby, including the tenant reaction. I kept the words plain. No labels, no guessing. Facts. Then I opened a folder on my computer and created a simple timeline file. I named it with the date. I added bullet points. I backed it up to a small drive I kept in the desk drawer for work records. It was not dramatic. It was just a habit I learned over decades. If something matters, you keep it clean and organized. I checked the camera system settings, not changing anything, not touching anything outside policy, just confirming what the system captured and how long it kept data. I noted it in my notebook too. I also looked at the work order system. Nina had no access to it, but she had been speaking like she did. She had been telling people she would approve things. That kind of claim can cause confusion fast. Confusion is fuel for takeover attempts. People obey the loudest person when they do not know who holds real authority. I sat back and listened to the building again. Pipes, fans, a distant elevator bell. These sounds have always been normal to me. That day, they felt like a reminder. The building runs on systems, not on feelings, not on confident speeches. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked down and saw a missed call notification from a number I recognized from my contacts. It was Attorney Rios, the person I had spoken to once years ago about a lease issue. The message said he had time to speak today if I wanted to talk. I did not call back right away. I stared at the screen and let my thoughts settle. I was not looking for revenge. I was looking for stability. I was looking for a clear line that no one could pretend not to see. Upstairs, Nina and Kyle were playing a social game. They wanted me to react so they could frame me as the problem. They wanted tears, shouting, pleading, anything that made me look unreliable. I set my phone face down. I opened my calendar and reviewed the next few days. Maintenance checks, vendor visits, rent due dates, building routines. I circled one date in red, not because it was special yet, but because I knew Nina would create a public moment soon. People like her do not stop at private control. They want public confirmation. Then I stood up, washed my face in the small sink, and looked at myself in the cracked mirror on the wall. I saw a tired man, yes, but I also saw a man who still knew how to keep his footing. I picked up the phone again and saved the voicemail to my records folder. I did not press play in the office. I just saved it and wrote one more line in my notebook. Today, they crossed from disrespect into a power grab. The next morning, I did not go upstairs to argue. I did not send long messages. I did not demand apologies. I treated the day like a workday with extra risks. I showered in the small maintenance restroom. I changed into clean clothes. I drank water. I ate a plain breakfast from the vending machine. Then I opened my notebook and wrote a short list of what I needed to confirm. I needed to know what Nina could touch and what she could not touch. I needed to know what Kyle could influence. I needed to know what would calm the tenants, because confusion spreads fast in a building. I started with the security vendor. Our building uses an outside company for cameras and access systems. They install equipment. They keep the service agreement active. They also respond when someone asks for changes. Those requests leave a trail if you ask the right way. I called the vendor and asked for a meeting in person. I did not explain my home problem on the phone. I only said I needed to review system settings and standard procedures. I used the same tone I use when an elevator needs inspection. An hour later, I walked to their office across town. It was a plain place. Fluorescent lights, a small waiting area, a counter with brochures about safety and service. Evan Shaw met me in a conference room. He was about my age range, maybe a little younger. He had the tired look of someone who hears complaints all day. At first, he spoke to me like I was just a building worker asking for help. I let him. I told him I wanted to confirm camera retention length. I told him I wanted to confirm how change requests were approved. I told him I wanted to know what kind of records existed for access changes and admin logins. Evan said their system tracked requests and actions. He said they had standard rules. He said only authorized contacts could approve changes, and they verified identity. He also said mistakes happened when people sounded confident and staff were rushed. I said I understood. I asked him to explain the verification steps like I was new. I asked him to repeat the timeline for how long footage stayed in their system. I took notes the whole time. I also asked a careful question. I asked if anyone had contacted them recently about our building. Evan hesitated, then said he could not discuss private client issues in detail without proper process. I did not push. I only said I respected that and wanted to follow procedure. When I left the vendor office, I felt better. Not because I had won anything, but because systems do not care about charm. Systems care about authorization. My next stop was the bank. I went to the local branch I have used for years. The staff there know my face. They know my habits. I walked in calmly and asked to speak to a manager for a routine review. I did not say my wife tried to remove me from my home. I did not say my stepson tried to pressure me. I kept it practical. I asked what kind of changes could be requested on accounts connected to building operations. I asked what needed signatures and what needed identity confirmation. I asked what protections existed against sudden changes that were not approved properly. The manager said there were clear steps. She said large changes required verified approval. She said they tracked requests. She said if I had concerns, I could add extra safeguards. I nodded and said I would consider it. I did not do anything dramatic at the counter. I only asked for information and wrote it down. On the way back, I stopped at a diner for coffee. I sat by the window and watched people walk past. I thought about Nina's pattern again. She always wanted to be the person who spoke first. She wanted to be seen as the one in control. I remembered a moment from a month before the wedding. We were walking through the lobby, and she asked why tenants were allowed to post notes on the bulletin board. She said it looked messy. She said she would fix it when she had the authority. At the time, I told her the board helped people share small things, like lost keys or local events. I thought it was harmless. Now I realized she was telling me her plan out loud. When I returned to the building, the lobby felt different. People looked up when I walked in. Some looked away quickly. Some stared a second too long. I was becoming a topic. Mrs. Patel asked if I was all right. Her voice was gentle and careful. I told her I was fine. I told her I was handling things through proper channels. I did not give details. I did not want to make her a target for Nina's frustration. Then I noticed the mailroom. Nina was there, standing near the package shelves. She had a marker in her hand. She was writing labels on small sticky notes. Kyle stood nearby, scrolling on his phone, acting bored. Nina saw me and smiled like this was a normal day. She said she was organizing the mailroom to make it more efficient. She said she was tired of disorder. I looked at the labels. Some were harmless, some were not. She was trying to redirect where packages should be placed. She was trying to create a new routine that made her the center point. I told her the mailroom had an established process and changes needed to go through the building desk. I said it calmly, like a reminder. Nina said she did not need permission. She said she lived here now. She said a wife had rights. Kyle looked up and said I should stop being controlling. He said people would respect me more if I acted like a man with confidence. I did not respond to his comment. I did not give him what he wanted. I took a slow breath and told Nina that tenants needed consistency. I said random changes would cause lost packages and complaints. I said I did not want problems. Nina said I was afraid of complaints because I was weak. She said she was not afraid. She said she would handle anyone who disagreed. I nodded once. Then I walked away. I went to the community room on the ground floor. It was empty. The chairs were stacked. The lights were off. I turned on one row of lights and looked at the space. This room has hosted holiday cookie tables, tenant meetings, and quiet voting days. It is a neutral place. It is also a place where rumors become facts if the wrong person controls the microphone. I stood there for a minute and pictured Nina speaking to tenants like she owned the building. I pictured Kyle watching, enjoying the attention. I pictured me standing in the corner like a worker, waiting to be told what to do. I did not feel anger. I felt a clean understanding. Back in the basement office, I reviewed my notes. I wrote down the vendor's procedures. I wrote down the bank's safeguards. I wrote down what I saw in the mailroom. Then I saved the notes the same way I saved maintenance records, neat and dated. In the afternoon, a tenant named Lena passed by the maintenance doorway. She was holding her phone and walking slowly, like she wanted to talk but did not want to be obvious. She said people were confused. She said Nina told a few tenants that new management was coming. She said some people believed it because Nina sounded certain. I thanked Lena for telling me. I did not ask her to take sides. I only told her that the building would stay stable and the correct information would be shared soon. That evening, as I checked the lobby camera feed, I saw Nina posting a notice on the bulletin board. She pressed the paper flat with both hands like she was sealing a decision. I could not read it from the camera angle, but I knew what it meant. She was moving the conflict into a public room, and I was done letting her write the story alone. The notice Nina posted stayed on the bulletin board all night. By morning, half the building had seen it. People do not read every rule, but they read anything that looks like a power change. The paper had big words like mandatory and community and new standards. Nina knew exactly how to pull attention without giving real facts. I took a picture of the notice from my own phone. Then I went back to the basement office. I wrote the time I saw it and where it was placed. I wrote who was standing nearby when she posted it, based on the camera view. I did not add feelings. I kept it clean. Then I called Attorney Rios. When he answered, his voice was calm. He asked me to explain what happened from the start. I told him the hallway incident, the lobby talk, Kyle's pressure, and the notice. I told him I wanted everything done the right way. I told him I did not want shouting matches and rumors. I wanted a lawful line that could not be ignored. He told me to come in. His office was quiet and smelled like paper and coffee. He greeted me with a small nod and offered water. He did not act surprised by any of it. People like him hear the same patterns in different clothes. He asked direct questions. He asked what Nina knew about my role. He asked what I told her. He asked what she was claiming in public. He asked how long she had been in the unit and what access she had. He asked about Kyle and whether he had keys. He asked what I wanted the outcome to be. I told him I wanted the building stable. I told him I wanted my home back. I told him I wanted Nina to stop using my silence as permission. I told him I wanted tenant trust restored because tenants deserve clarity. He said the next step was to let systems speak. He said words do not stop someone who believes they can push through you. He said paperwork and policy do. He laid out options in plain language. He did not show me anything dramatic on a screen. He kept it like a checklist. He said I needed to be consistent, calm, and ready for public moments. He said Nina was building a public story, and I needed a public correction without turning it into a shouting scene. He asked me for basic facts. I gave them. He asked me to confirm timelines. I did. He asked me to think about the meeting Nina scheduled and what it meant. I told him it was a stage. I told him she wanted witnesses. He nodded once and said we would use the same stage, but with the right rules. Before I left, he had me sign a few things. He did not speak like it was a weapon. He spoke like it was a safety rail. He said I should not mention the details to anyone until the right time. He said keeping quiet now was not weakness. It was control. I agreed. On my way back to the building, I stopped at a small store and bought a simple folder with a firm spine. I also bought a pack of plain labels and a pen. Not to create drama, just to keep things organized. If you walk into a tense room, you do not want loose papers and confusion. You want order. In the basement office, I made a small go bag. I put the folder inside, the notebook, a charger, and my basic keys. I also added a spare set of work gloves and a small flashlight, because I am still the kind of man who prepares for practical problems. Mrs. Patel came down later to drop off a stack of maintenance requests. She looked tired. She said tenants were asking questions. She said Nina had been telling people the meeting would change how the building ran. She said some tenants felt nervous and some felt curious like it was entertainment. I told Mrs. Patel she did not need to argue with Nina. I told her to stay polite and keep doing her job. I told her the correct information would be shared soon, and it would be shared in a way that protected staff, not put them in the middle. Mrs. Patel asked if I was all right. I said I was steady. I said I was handling it properly. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. She did not ask more. I respected her for that. In the afternoon, I walked through the lobby slowly. I did not hide. I did not look down. I greeted tenants the same way I always do. A simple hello. A small nod. If someone asked about the meeting, I said there would be clarity soon and the building would remain stable. I did not say Nina was lying. I did not insult her. I did not make it personal in public. I kept it about order. That evening, Nina came downstairs with Kyle. She wore a bright outfit, like she was hosting an event. She spoke loudly in the lobby, calling people by the wrong names, acting friendly as if she had known them for years. She said she was excited to build a better community. She said some changes were overdue. She said the building had been run too softly. Kyle stood behind her with his arms crossed, watching reactions. He smiled when he saw people listening. He looked at me once, like he expected me to shrink. I did not. Nina approached me near the elevator. She said the meeting would be good for everyone. She said she hoped I would behave and not embarrass her again. She said if I caused trouble, she would make sure everyone knew what kind of man I was. I told her I would be calm. I told her I would respect the building and the tenants. She tilted her head and said I should remember who my wife was now. She said she would not live like a silent guest. I said she was not a guest. She smiled like she misunderstood on purpose and walked away. Later, Lena knocked lightly on the basement office door. She asked if the meeting was going to be a mess. She said people were already talking in group chats. She said someone claimed I had been removed from the unit because I failed at my job. I thanked her for telling me. I told her rumors grow when there is no clear answer. I told her I would not let tenants stay in confusion. I did not ask her to post anything. I did not ask her to take my side. I just asked her to be careful with what she repeated. The night before the meeting, I did one more walk of the building. I checked the side doors and the hallway lights. I checked the community room chairs and the microphone stand. Not because I wanted a show, but because if Nina planned a show, I wanted the room to be safe and controlled. I slept on the small couch in the basement office again. It was not comfortable, but it kept me close to the building's heartbeat. In the morning, I shaved, dressed neatly, and ate a simple breakfast. I placed the folder in my bag and zipped it all the way closed. By late afternoon, tenants began to gather near the community room. I heard voices in the hallway outside. I saw small groups in the lobby leaning in, whispering. Nina walked among them like a host, smiling and touching shoulders like she belonged in the center of everything. I stood near the back for a moment and watched the room fill. I did not rush. I did not try to win attention. I waited until it was time to end the confusion the right way, with calm and structure, in front of everyone who had been invited to doubt me. The community room was full. Folding chairs scraped the floor. People held phones low, pretending they were not recording. Nina stood near the front, with the microphone in hand, smiling like a host. Kyle stayed beside her, watching the room like he owned the air in it. Nina began speaking about new standards and new leadership. She said the building needed stronger control. She introduced me as the supervisor who handled small tasks, and she implied I was struggling to keep up. She acted like this meeting was her victory lap. I waited until she paused for breath. Then I walked forward at a normal pace and asked for the microphone. I did not reach for it. I asked. The room went quiet enough that the ventilation sounded loud. Nina hesitated, but she handed it over, still smiling. She expected me to sound weak. I thanked the tenants for coming. I said I understood why people felt confused. I said confusion in a building creates stress, and stress creates problems. I said I would correct the record with facts, not opinions. Attorney Rios stood up from the second row. He carried a folder with clean tabs. He introduced himself as my legal counsel and said he was there to present verified information. Nina's smile tightened. Kyle shifted his weight. Rios placed documents on the front table and turned them so the first row could see. He explained that the building was owned by an entity under my control, and that I had full authority over building operations and access approvals. He explained, in plain steps, that marriage did not transfer building ownership or management rights. Nina tried to speak over him. Rios continued without raising his voice. He pointed to signatures, dates, and registered records. He said any claims of new leadership were false. He said staff were instructed to follow established management contacts only. Then he addressed the hallway incident. He said we had requested footage from the security system under proper procedure. Evan from the vendor was present and confirmed retention, verification steps, and access logs. The screen turned on. The room watched footage of my bags being pushed into the hallway. People saw doors opening. People saw Nina speaking to neighbors while I stood there holding my own luggage. No sound, but the meaning did not need sound. Rios showed a timeline with dates and times. He showed log entries for attempted changes and requests that were made without authorization. He explained that certain actions were blocked and that those attempts were now documented. Nina's face changed when she realized the room was no longer reacting to her confidence. The tenants were reacting to proof. Kyle stepped forward like he wanted to take control of the space. Security staff, already positioned near the door, shifted slightly. Not aggressive, just present. Evan reminded the room that the building had rules for meetings and that disruptions would end the session. Rios then stated the immediate actions being enforced. Nina's access to building systems was revoked. Any keys not issued through management had to be returned. Staff were instructed not to accept directives from her. He also stated that my residence in the unit was not negotiable, and that any attempt to remove me again would be treated as a formal violation, not a private disagreement. Mrs. Patel stood and confirmed the official contact process for tenants. She said rent and requests would continue as normal. She said nobody needed to worry about sudden rule changes made by someone without authority. Nina looked around for support and found only silence. Kyle's phone lowered. Rios slid a plain envelope onto the table and asked for keys to be placed inside. Security waited by the door, and the room stayed still as Nina understood, in one clean moment, that her takeover had ended.